Today on the Next, our guest is Alex Stone, CEO of CoachUp. CoachUp is a service that connects athletes with private coaches. They believe that private coaching is the secret to reaching the next level in sports and in life. They have thousands of coaches across the country and hundreds of training sessions happening every day, and they're the nation's leading private coaching company. They're dedicated to their mission, which is helping kids change the trajectory of their lives through sports. Now, this is super relevant to me, of course. If you've listened to this show historically, you know that I'm on this quest to build my next company, and I'm in the early stages of anchoring around building a new kind of athlete development company. And part of that means steeping in the space and talking to people who are close to it from a wide range of perspectives, players, coaches, parents, nutritionists, strength trainers, scouts, agents, heads of leagues, et cetera, et cetera. Alex is certainly well-placed, given that he's working with private coaches every day and working with kids on the other side in a marketplace of sorts. So it was fascinating to learn about the journey of CoachUp, Alex's journey to doing the work that he does, and what his thoughts are around the state of youth sports, the state of player development, where the opportunities are from a capitalist standpoint, and also what's in the best interest of players and in families to set them up best in sports and in life. Without further ado, Alex Stone, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jason, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming. And fortuitous timing, because I just had Jordan, of course, the founder of CoachUp, on the show with that. I mean, that published earlier this week, and we didn't talk much about CoachUp because, of course, from an operating standpoint, he's on new things, but psyched to have you on. And now I'm kind of moving in the sports direction as he's moving away from it. So really grateful for you making the time, because I have a lot to learn from people like you that have been doing this for a lot longer than me.
Yeah. No, likewise. It's great to be on. Jordan, obviously the founder of CoachUp, and now he's moved into, his new ventures, and he's been involved in sports forever. So glad you got his perspective on a lot of things and on his new venture. And then, you've been in the space a long time. I wouldn't sell yourself short. So always good to chat with like-minded entrepreneurs, and especially in the youth sports space. And yeah, happy to go through it.
Sweet. Well, for starters, maybe just give the overview of CoachUp, because I also know it. It seems like it's evolved quite a bit since its founding days. So I guess, where did it start, and what are you guys up to now?
Yeah. So Jordan Flegel founded the company back in 2012. And really, back then, I think the catalyst was he was doing private sessions with a coach, and there was no streamlined way to find a private coach or a one-on-one, a skills coach, if you will. And then even if you did, it was really challenging. There wasn't as many software solutions from a payment processing, from making sure that you had insurance and things like that for coaches. So I think his goal was to give coaches the tools to allow them to do what they do best, and that's coach, and not spend time trying to run the back office of a business. And then also, where can you have a streamlined place where parents can come on the platform and find a trusted, verified coach who can fulfill whatever their needs are for either themselves or for their children who are trying to reach another level, right? So we're a two-sided platform. Coaches on one side, we give them the software tools to run their business effectively and focus on coaching. And then we also help athletes and parents find coaches who are a good fit for their son or daughter, or for themselves, with whatever their respective sport is. And then they work together with that coach based on their goals, right? To help them go out and achieve whatever it is that they're trying to achieve. Sometimes that's making the varsity team. Sometimes that's just starting a new sport. Sometimes it's a tune-up, before tryouts and things like that. Other times it's a consistent, extra skills. As the world has gone to tournament teams and travel ball and all those types of things. So where can you get those extra reps and make sure you're working with a coach? We want to give you a place to find that. We've definitely evolved. I took over the business in 2020, just before 2020. So COVID, fun time, trying to get people to do training sessions together when COVID told everyone to stay in their house. But we came out of that on the other side and pretty excited the direction we're going. We just opened our first training center up here or down here in Woburn. And the goal here is to have a very like multifunctional training space. So we have a basketball court, we have turf space, we have a baseball tunnel. We can service probably 10 or 15 different sports in here. And the goal is to give coaches not only the platform and the software to run their business, but can we give them a home base where they can conduct their sessions as well? If it's bad weather, if it's winter, if it's just as simple from a scheduling and time management standpoint to be here. We had a lacrosse coach in here yesterday for 7 straight hours, and he just stacks his sessions one by one by one, so he knows he's in the same place and he's not driving all over creation to do those sessions. So we see a world where we can.
Wait, one funny story about that, and then I'll let you get back into it. But I went and searched on your platform this morning. Just I was curious what kind of coaches were on there and stuff, and like one of the gold lacrosse coaches who looks like a really accomplished. He's coached a number of different levels and high schools and stuff like that, and super well rated and everything. As a kid, I played against in lacrosse growing up. So just a small world moment. But anyways,
yeah, you'd be surprised who you can find out. Coaches. We have some interesting coaches all over the world, or all over the country, which is interesting. Sometimes we see the applications come through of former professional athletes, and we wonder, is this real, or what are we trying to coach, or how are we using the platform? So but that's the future for us, right? Is can we marry physical locations and including strength and conditioning at some point? We're working on some of that as well, where you can come under one roof, you can get your skill work done, you can get your strength, speed, and agility work done, true sports performance. And then also, can we leverage our platform to help coaches run their businesses more effectively and efficiently long term, whether on the CoachUp marketplace platform or also a more enterprise white label solution moving forward.
Well, thanks for that overview. I've got a number of questions about the business, but before we get into that, what's been your journey with sports, and was it sports that led you to CoachUp, or marketplaces that led you to CoachUp? Like how'd you come into working in the business of sports?
Yeah, definitely not marketplaces. This will be my first and hopefully last one. Long term.
You grew up saying like, I want to be a marketplace entrepreneur when I grow up.
Yeah, I think I had to Google what a marketplace was when I first joined the business. But yeah, so I was an athlete my entire life and played high school ball. And then I enlisted in the Marine Corps when I was a junior in high school. So I always knew that that's what I wanted to do. My grandfather was a World War II Marine. I always just was interested in the military and the Marine Corps specifically. And so I enlisted as a junior to kind of avoid a lot of those kind of recruiting conversations and next level conversations for football or hockey or whatever it might be. So I served 4 years, did a couple deployments overseas. And when I came back, I tried to think about, hey, what is it I want to do? And it was actually an old football coach who offered me a job. I'd call it a job. I worked for free, I'm pretty sure. But he was kind of mentoring me in overseas manufacturing, which led me to working with brands like Dick's Sporting Goods and Under Armour, et cetera. And I was very fortunate. At one point, Under Armour offered me a full-time job to come down and work on their team sports and accessories business, which was a dream come true for me. So
in Baltimore?
In Baltimore, yeah. So I was back from the military maybe a year and a half, and I packed my suitcase and I said, of course I'm coming. I moved down to Baltimore. I'd never been there before, and it was a great opportunity. The brand was still very much up and coming at the time, and was there working on team sports accessories, everything from football gloves, soccer shin guards, to then we worked on the licensed business, which was inflatables, and we dabbled in some hockey stuff as well. So it was a lot of fun. I did 5 years, just a little over 5 years there, and I had this urge to really start working with people who were similar to me, which I didn't know at the time, that I was under the assumption when I joined the military that I gave up my NCAA eligibility, that I just missed that window, right? And the reality is when you go in the military, it's actually put on hold. And when you come out as a 21, 22, or however old you are, right, you still have all your NCAA eligibility. On top of that, you also have your military educational benefits, which is essentially, more or less a full scholarship to most schools that you'd want to go to. So I said, man, why didn't I know about this? When I was coming out, it was an interesting time in 2008 when I got out. There was a recession and not a lot of jobs and different things. I could have went back and tried to play. So I left Under Armour to build this company, Athletes of Valor, which really the catalyst there was, how do we build all the tools and resources that are available for high school athletes? How do we build those same tools for active duty military members who might be interested in transitioning out of service to go play college sports? So the hook there in my view was, one, not only can we help these schools provide an opportunity for military members in a more meaningful way outside of, a veterans lounge with a couch and a ping pong table in a corner somewhere, like how can we actually help them transition? And then from a transition perspective, like where do you find a brotherhood or a sisterhood and mentors with coaches and make sure that people are looking out for another? So when you do transition, you're reintegrating into the civilian world, as we'd call it. There's no better place to do that than a team in a locker room, right? Where you have, other leadership, you have coaches, you have staff there to help support you through that journey. And the graduation rate for student athletes is significantly higher than it is for regular students or military veterans as well. So it was a really cool business platform. We built a really cool platform. I was very fortunate to be sponsored by Under Armour, Gatorade. We started going all over the country to these military installations. We were running full-on NFL combines, soccer combines, basketball combines. It was a blast. We had a software platform to support all of it above. The challenge we had was to really become a scalable business, we had to focus more on enrollment management. And that's really where the key was from a business standpoint. And I don't know if you've ever sold into higher education before, but it really wasn't my interest.
I haven't, but I can only imagine. I mean, as someone who went through higher education as a student, I got a peek behind the curtain of how they work.
Yeah, so I was like, no, thank you. That's not really what we want to do. And then this opportunity with CoachUp was going through this pivotal moment of their kind of their company life, if you will, and trying to work on different things, whether it was recruiting or camps, clinics, some different things at the time. This was in 2018. And there were some synergies there. We said, hey, originally it was like, hey, should we license the Athletes of Valor software? And Jordan was involved in the Athletes of Valor creation as well. He was an initial investor and on the board with me. And there was a lot of synergy to say, hey, like, doesn't really work from a licensing standpoint or software standpoint. Like, why don't we just merge these two businesses together and I can help in some capacity in some of these new verticals you guys are focusing on. So there was another CEO at the time, and we integrated the businesses. I still focused on Athletes of Valor supporting. And then through COVID, really, we just made a lot of changes. It was really hard time to continue to help college athletics because college athletics were more or less shut down. Military bases were shut down during COVID from an outside access standpoint. So we really put that business to the side and just couldn't really support it, moving forward from there. And CoachUp, we came out on the other end, and that's how I got to CoachUp. And then I took over as CEO shortly thereafter. And that's my long-winded way of how I got here and how I got into sports. And, sports have always been a resource for me. So I think it's something that I'm very fortunate to be able to build a career around. And now, since 2008, built a career in sports in some capacity, whether it's manufacturing products or services, and now, supporting coaches and athletes all over the country in multiple sports, helping something that I believe in and has helped not only, in my childhood and youth, but all the way through from a career perspective.
Uh-huh. And remind me again, Alex, I know when we spoke a few weeks ago when we were scheduling the pod, you mentioned that you have kids and that they're just now getting into youth sports. How old are your kids?
So I have a 7-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 2-year-old. And my 7-year-old he's full go in everything. So yeah, we're juggling hockey, soccer, baseball, flag football when we can fit it in. My daughter does soccer and softball as well as, dance, which I've never, I had 2 brothers growing up, so I was never exposed to the dance world. But now with my first daughter, that's an aggressive one itself. And then my 2-year-old, he gets dragged around to it all. So he's in the mix for everything.
So it seems like you're starting to get a taste of the current youth sports landscape. I mean, it's changed a lot since we were growing up. In what ways do you feel like it's different? And what's your assessment of the state in youth sports? What's good about it, and maybe what some of the challenges are?
Yeah, I think how it's different from when we grew up is, obviously there was it was much more seasonal when we grew up. You kind of played the sport of the season. Typically there was one or two and you kind of had to choose. You weren't playing multiple sports in the same season, outside of a few outlier cases. It was much more contained, I think, to town sports. There was a few options for travel ball or clubs, if you will. But for the most part, it was contained to town sports, and you played with your friends, typically the friends that you went to school with, and that's how they kind of broke it up. I think that's a lot different today. I think there's a lot more options out there from a team perspective and development standpoint. Even learn to skate, some of that stuff we don't do through our town program because there's this other program that skates out of the same rink, and they just have a strong organization in this, specifically in learn to skate for those 2, 3, 4-year-olds who are just starting. So I think it's a little bit different in that sense. I think also schedule wise is a little bit more intense now than it was back when we were kids, which I think is good and bad. I mean, it's, as a parent, it's nice to have things on the schedule to keep your kids busy so they're not killing each other at the house. But at the same time, I think you miss a lot of that neighborhood play. You don't see it as much anymore. You don't see stickball games happening, wiffle ball games happening. You don't see as much full blocking of the streets, street hockey games of everybody in the neighborhood pulling nets out in the middle of the street and playing. So as far as like a state, I think, obviously there's a lot of talk about the commercialization of youth sports and the way that that's going. And I agree with it to an extent. I think there's good and bad aspects to it. I think having more options to find a right fit for your son or daughter is naturally a good thing. But I do think that, there's also a lot of that keeping up with the Joneses or choosing an outside program outside of your town program, or trying to play year round to develop those skills when playing more games doesn't necessarily equate to getting better, depending on your sport. So that's where I think we just have to be careful. And, we run a business around, we believe heavily in one-on-one and small group training to actually improve from an athletic standpoint. And that's both from a skill development standpoint, but also from a, human performance standpoint of strength, conditioning, speed, agility. So I think it's a good thing that there's more resources than ever to achieve whatever goals that you have. I think the bad thing is, it spreads a lot of things very thin, and it makes it hard to navigate for someone who maybe doesn't have as much experience in the space.
And from a skills coach's standpoint, how is the landscape evolving in terms of the tools that are available to them and what path they should pursue if they're thinking about getting into the business? And like you said, their core competency is being on the ice or being on the field or being in the cage or whatever. And then all the crap that goes along with that, like maybe is a time suck and doesn't necessarily give them energy. So how's that landscape evolving? And then how are you evolving, and what are the implications of each of those on each other?
Yeah.
It's it's just kind of a weirdly worded question, but I hope you know what I'm getting at.
I mean, I think about it all the time. I mean, if you think about in 2012, right, like Venmo didn't exist. I don't even think, did Instagram exist? I don't think so back in 2012. So that's when CoachUp started, right? So coaches were their biggest challenge was like, hey, how do I even process a payment? I don't know if Stripe was even available back in 2012, right? So you're trying to figure out, how do you even process a payment? How do you, there was no such thing, and not as much of like personal branding, right? In social media and things like that. So it's definitely evolved since then. Since my time, I think I see that's more so, right? Like the younger coaches who are former collegiate athletes, maybe just graduating or a couple of years out of college, who are starting to do skills coaching or other coaching, they're much more technologically advanced, right? So for them to go spin up and I think the tools out there, you can get a Squarespace page for, whatever it is, $10 or $20 a month, no code type things where you just put in your information, and they make it really easy for you to start a business, right? It's getting more and more streamlined in that sense. So I wouldn't say we have to compete with that, but some coaches are really good at marketing themselves and building their own personal brand. And quite frankly, just through Instagram, people can find you by following you, and then you can typically accept Venmo payments and do your private sessions that way, or small groups. We've seen a lot of coaches be successful doing that. I think that only goes so far before you know it. You're trying to coach, so many hours a week, but at the same time, you're probably sitting at your kitchen table. Like, how do I do these from a tax perspective? How do I manage, actually run this like a business with a P&L, and how much I'm spending, and how do I put together these programs to make sure that the product is worth the dollars that we're charging out there. So how we've evolved, right, is I think we're really strong right now at getting people started. So coaches started. So, hey, you want to come on our platform. We have all the tools and resources available to you. We do a lot of the marketing. So with customer acquisition, we have clients all the time reaching out. And I think on average on our platform, a coach will get 8 to 10 leads a year. Now, they're not always a fit and they don't always convert, but that's on the coach. Really, once we make that connection, it's on the coach to really build that relationship with the athlete or the parent, whoever they're working with. So I see that as a great starting point for someone who wants to decide, hey, do I really want to get into, I hate the word private coaching because I don't think it's really the best term for it, but like become a skills coach or a small group coach, right? And then what I see is changing, and where we're trying to move to as well is there's some coaches, I don't want to say they outgrow that, but they're very adamant on having their own brand. So Jason Jacobs hockey training, right? They don't want to just be a participant on the CoachUp platform. They really want to build a company around this. So we've launched a pro product, which allows the coaches to have their own website. Again, no code, low code, couple templates, you fill it in, but you manage it. We're taking that to the next level where we're going to have a far more robust platform for coaches who want to run their own business, and they really want to manage their clients that way. We want to give you all the tools that we have, but when it comes from a customer management standpoint, it really moves over to you, and those are your customers, your business. We're just powering that business through all the CoachUp software and helping you navigate what that looks like. And then also facilities, right? Like the biggest question if you're a skills coach is you say, hey, this is great. I just got my first basketball kid who wants to work with me. Where do I get a basketball hoop, and where can we do this? And sometimes, a public park works. But how do you know if it's going to rain that day or a windy day? So we want to make sure we want to go where coaches are and where athletes are. And that's in the communities, involved with the coaching in the local community level. And we want to be there to support them in a very a la carte way. So a coach can come in, if they're a CoachUp coach and the athlete is on CoachUp, they can use our facility to conduct those sessions and make it really streamlined and simple for them. So I think it's definitely evolved where technology has evolved. The younger coaches have grown up with technology, so it's much more streamlined for them to just go download an app and figure out how to get things going. But the core challenge has never changed, and that's how do I get customers, right? How do I get clients? So whether they're building their own personal brand on social media, or whether they use a platform like us to help them acquire customers, or they're involved in the local community, those are all the kind of key pieces that ultimately remain the same to grow your business.
So as we're talking here, I mean, I thought it was a two-sided marketplace, but it sounds more like a three-sided marketplace, right?
Yeah,
because it's
sides. So
yeah, because it's the kid and family, it's the coach, and then it's the facility, right?
Right.
And is it on the coach today to? And I know you built your own facility, and so you have a home there, but let's say the coach is in a different part of the world. Is it on the coach to figure out where to host the session, or do you help with the facilities as well?
We do. So each coach typically has 3 or 4 locations like on their platform or on their profile that they either have a relationship with or know that are available. Sometimes they book space themselves. Like if you're a baseball coach, they might be at a baseball facility where they know they have a certain amount of tunnel access. It really varies depending on each coach. So I think there's our facilities. We do have some partnerships with other facilities if we need to reach out. We also offer those coaches, if they are training at another facility, we offer like additionally insured. So make sure they have insurance, even though if they're training somewhere else. So those are some key things. But that's always one of the biggest challenges, right? Is like, where does that session take place? So we're trying to support that in a deeper way.
And I've never built a marketplace, and I'm certainly not steeped in the best practices for how to do it. I hear these stories about how they're so hard and they take so much capital, and once you get them really going, they can be really lucrative, but the failure rate is high. First of all, did I get that right from your experience? And then, like, what's your assessment just in terms of how to build a marketplace and what the challenges are and where you guys are in that journey?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a pretty fair um, assessment. It is challenging. Like I think we joked about, I don't know if I would ever start my own marketplace.
Eh,
Um, I think the way we're evolving and being more involved and outside of just the two-sided marketplace and having additional verticals and being more ingrained in the communities is a key strategy for us, because I do think there can be a challenge with a marketplace in itself. I mean, we're a little bit unique just in a sense, and the amount of coming out of COVID, the amount of marketplaces I saw pop up for things like NIL or mentoring, and so many of them reached out and wanted to partner or wanted to talk about it. And I think within a year or two, I had all the same ones reached out and said, "Hey, like we're out of money, do you guys want to acquire us? Do you want to work together?" And I feel for that situation, because when you're building two sides, customer acquisition, there's a cost to that, and how much cost, right? And then if you're only making a small percentage of the transaction, what does that payback period look like? So they are very challenging. I think we've been very fortunate. My goal when I took over the company was, how do we get to long-term sustainability and profitability? And we were able to do that very quickly. And that allows us to do more about what's right for the customers and what's right for the coaches and athletes, more so than, typical marketplace have to get to an extreme level of scale because their margins are so thin to get to a viable business. And the good news with us is that our software is also so robust, right? And our funnel over the years, that if we 10x tomorrow from a top of funnel, like nothing would really change. We don't have 30 engineers, right? And we don't need to take on an additional 20 and have huge overhead. We're a very distributed company. We're a very small internal team. We're very flexible in that sense. And I was very adamant on, when I did take over the business, that's how we have to structure this for long-term growth. And we need to be able to go to where our customers are. We need to be much more flexible and agile, and we need to think outside of just the marketplace, because I think it's really hard for a youth sports specific marketplace to scale to a level of where traditional marketplaces have had success. If you look at the care.coms and some of those other big ones, the volume has to be so high for it to be a viable business. And I just didn't think that we wanted to chase that. So we actually retracted a little bit, got the core unit economics where we want them to be, and focused really where we can add the most value to both sides of the platform and do so profitably. And we just decided to do more of that than chase some of the other things.
What was the logic behind opening the physical facility, and then how does that change the experience for the coach? And same question for the kid.
Yeah. I mean, it was always, so we've talked for years, like, what if we had a physical space, right? In the models out there are a lot different, right? Could we do it different? And could we have a point of view around it, right? Where it's not just this warehouse and we just rent it per the hour. Like, that's not what we do and how we operate. Every coach and client who comes through here is a CoachUp customer, has to be, in order to use our space. And it's very affordable compared to, other tunnel rentals or turf rentals, court rentals, whatever it might be. So the catalyst was, again, cost of acquisition for customers digitally has gotten so high compared to, in 2012, when running Facebook and Instagram ads and Google ads was a lot cheaper. So, and I think that that's going to continually trend even higher, also with privacy changes, right? It's harder to target the right people who might need your services, right? So my theory was, if we can, instead of investing those additional dollars that typical marketplaces really do in certain markets, what if we what does a specific market look like if we actually put a physical facility and ingrain ourselves in the community? What does that look like from a growth perspective? Not only growth, but can we change the core KPIs of a customer? How long do they stay longer? Do they have a better experience versus just someone they found on this platform, and then there's no face to the name of CoachUp, right? And I think that was a big part of it. Can we put a face to the name to our brand, that we're more than just a platform that connects the dots and, charges a fee to do that? So that was the catalyst. It's worked out for Woober specifically in Massachusetts. Massachusetts is going to be probably our second largest state in the country, which is surprising when you could fit, I don't know how many things of Massachusetts in Texas or California or something along those lines. And we've seen significant growth in a positive direction here just by having a physical location. So I think it's proving to be, we're solving a problem where a lot of coaches are always like, hey, where does a session happen? From the coach side, it's been great for them, especially in the winter, right? A lot of coaches, soccer coaches in the winter, their skill business went to zero because they didn't have space to do sessions. Now they have a year-round business. They have dedicated hours here, and they know that they can bring their clients here and do that. So it consolidates them. So we eliminate the back and forth texting or messaging on our platform. Say, hey, where can we do this? What time? It's very simple. Also for customers, especially new customers, right? They know they're coming to a credible facility on day one versus, hey, I'm going to go meet this new coach at the, at the middle school gym. We've never met them. We don't know where to go. It's very simple saying, hey, I know I can be at CoachUp in Woburn on 7:00 on Tuesday nights, and they just book that and they schedule it and they know that we're here. So I think it's really simplified one of the main logistical challenges that we have with coaches and clients, but also has given coaches a very, we have basketballs here, we have cones, we have all the training aids here. So instead of lugging all this stuff around in their car, they walk in 10 minutes before their session. They have everything they need to conduct their session. It's a clean facility, heavily branded, and they're really proud of running their business out of here. So I think those key things are now reflected in the unit economics in the core business within this 30-minute radius of Woburn. And then how can we replicate that in other areas where we have a condensed population of coaches and clients who are already training and using our platform?
It seems like there's a tension between coverage and quality, in the sense that the more closed the system and the more control you have around consistency, the better the experience for the customer. But the more open it is, the more coverage there is, and the more types of use cases you can support. What is the CoachUp philosophy when it comes to managing that tension, and how has that evolved, or how will it evolve looking forwards, if at all?
So can you clarify your question, like the openness of it?
Yeah. So for example, the extreme is you have one instructor for each skill, right? But they're awesome, right? And then the other extreme is it's open to any coach that wants to come, and all you do is sign up, and the more the better, because the more we have, the more coverage we have, right? But then there's no quality controls, right? And so where do you draw the line between those two things, between quality and quantity?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good question. It's been a conversation, I think, from day one. I think originally it was free to join for coaches, and there was some marketplaces go that route. They just let every coach on. There's some other sports marketplaces, they don't vet them. Basically they're saying, we're going to connect you and it's on you to be a good coach. And if people rebook you, great. And if not, then, it's more on you than on the brand. I think for us, we probably fall a little bit in the middle. There's definitely a minimum criteria to become a coach on our platform. I would say we hold pretty strong on that you have to have a certain level of experience, whether that's playing or coaching. Because I do think that we, as a brand, people see us from a quality standpoint. There's really strong coaches, and we're confident to know, like, if you're approved through our application process, that you reach that level of experience that as a dad or as a parent or as an athlete would be content with paying, for extra training, right? But there's certainly, we did I wouldn't say a retraction a couple of years ago, but we've always played with that application process and the criteria to see, naturally there's a belief in marketplaces. If you have more coaches, there's generally going to be more clients. But we also said, well, if we have less coaches, but we have higher quality coaches who are willing to take more clients and build their business, then I think that shouldn't we help them grow their business more than just kind of diluting that and getting, each coach gets one client a year or whatever it is. So I think we've done a good job of balancing and landing in a little bit of a sweet spot of active coaches who fit the right profile to make sure that they're still getting enough clients, but can also withstand some growth and some retraction themselves, where we're not diluting. I would hate for a customer, because you know how it is with customer reviews. It's always CoachUp. It's always like, hey, you see them and you try not to go down on posts or things like that. But even on our ads, right? They're saying, hey, I looked in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, and we couldn't find a football coach. And it's like, well, there's, 14 people in your town, and, the nearest thing is, football field is miles away. So we don't have coaches out there. But I think where you can find that density and population density, we have really strong coaches. We make sure that everyone has a great experience with those coaches. And the good thing about the marketplace is our review system and the behavior on the platform kind of self-selects who becomes a top coach and who doesn't, right? If you have good reviews, if you're responding to messages, if 2 clients reach out to you and you never respond, you fall out of those search results, right? So the client has a good experience with a coach. So there's a lot of things you can manipulate from the rules right from the beginning, and coaches are aware of these, of their rankings and things of that nature, to make sure that the better coaches are rising to the top, and the ones aren't doing so well kind of start to fizzle out.
And in terms of the 2 sides, or I guess 3 sides of the marketplace, where are you short? Like, is it supply is strong and demand is weak, or demand is strong or supply is weak? Does it depend on the region? Like, what's the trickiest part about the marketplace in its current form?
Yeah.
And yeah,
I would say that, like, there's a lot of different ways to slice marketplace growth. Some people go city by city, area by area. You can go by search volume, right? If you get search volume in a certain area, then do you go find a coach? It's very manual. I don't know if we necessarily subscribe to that. We kind of focus on where we're strong and in those areas. And we know, for example, hopefully he'll listen to this, our lovely founder, Jordan, who ran the Techstars Sports Accelerator out in Indianapolis. He used to always kind of check the search results when he was living out there doing the accelerators. Say, hey, I only see one basketball coach, right? And we've run a lot of tests of how do we go get 3 or 4 basketball coaches? How do we turn on ads and marketing and other things? And what does that look like? And then also, what's the payback period for starting to build those markets? And it's hard with a marketplace, given the margin and the unit economics, to make those make sense if you don't have a lot of capital for that initial push to build the space. But so we look at more, there's never a shortage, I guess you could say, but it's finding balance, especially in key markets. Do we have the right amount of good coaches based on the right amount of search volume and clients, right? And then also, where we have a strong base of coaches, we know we feel comfortable doing more customer acquisition in those areas, because those coaches are going to service that business at a very high level, and they're happy with that. Their businesses are growing. Customers are happy with that. They're finding great coaches. Versus we've kind of, I wouldn't say shied away from new markets, but we've put less emphasis on, if we can't service the one, volleyball customer in middle of Tennessee that we just don't have a volleyball coach, we don't have the resources maybe they did, this business had 10 years ago, right? After first raising some capital, to have, 20 customer service people trying to reach out and physically connect those dots, because we need to focus on where we can win.
What are your thoughts on remote coaching generally? And then what are your thoughts on it with a CoachUp hat on?
Generally remote, I think it depends on your sport. I think, something like running, right? If you have a great runner, run coach who's a highly accomplished coach, and they're located somewhere else and they're helping you put together a program, I think I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that it also depends on your age. I think if you're a little bit older and more advanced in your athletic career, if you have a remote coach who's putting together programming, strength and conditioning, whatever, and you're going to do the work, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. But I also don't think you can ever replace in-person, one-on-one, small group coaching. And I definitely don't believe in like the pre-recorded, like, or, purchase a plan type thing, right? I think everything should be customized to your specific needs and your specific desired outcomes so that you can go and achieve that. With the CoachUp hat on, like I double down on that, right? Like we saw a lot of people go to remote training during COVID. We tried to do the same for like 2 or 3 weeks, and I'm like, hey, this isn't who we are. And like at the end of the day, like let's just hold true to what we do. And we don't do a lot of remote training. What we see, I mean, everything that we do is in person, one-on-one or small group.
Mm-hmm.
Each coach has some remote components to that where you have an existing customer and maybe they can do a video review or do a FaceTime call to touch in after a game or whatever it might be. But for the most part, you have a relationship and there's a social aspect to that as well that I think is really important. So I'm not a huge believer in remote training outside of, key sports, again, such as running or strength and conditioning, something along those lines. I very much believe in-person coaching.
And a similar question as it relates to just measurement and progress from a player standpoint. Any thoughts in terms of continuity over time with these coaches and building out some of those capabilities for someone to measure how they're doing and see how they're progressing in their development journey? Because I can speak today, like, I've taken my kids to a bunch of different in-person skills, and they're great, but there's no measurement in progress. And so largely the measurement, I mean, you can look at the score sheet as a measurement in progress, right? But what about in terms of the skills that you're actually trying to work on? Like, do you think that matters for kids and generally? And then is that something that CoachUp would ever tackle in some way?
Yeah, we get approached a lot, or we've worked with a lot of other, technologies in the past from a measurement standpoint. I think it's hard to measure, right? Because I think I think you have to determine whether you're a parent or athlete, like what are you trying to measure, right? And then how do you do that and what does that actually mean? So I think, if you look at golf, right, and you can, get in a TrackMan and videotape and have a full video analysis and look at your scorecard and things like that, that's one thing. I think in some of the more core sports, whether it's basketball, baseball, hockey, football, whatever it might be, I think everyone has a different opinion of what success is of working with a coach and measuring your level of success as an athlete, right? Like, and I'll use an example of maybe it's a kid who was on the JV basketball team for 2 years and he worked with a coach and he's on the varsity team and he's socially happier. Does that show up on the stat sheet? Maybe not, but obviously his skills improved to some level, whether that's from intensity or playing defense or whatever. And as a parent, you might look at that and say, hey, you know what? Like, those 10 or 15 sessions or that year or two was very meaningful. I don't know how you could measure that beyond the outcome to an extent. Or it could be the same kid who's on the JV team who maybe scored an extra couple points, but he's generally happier because he's playing a little bit better and he's feeling more confident after working with his coach. I mean, that's not a measurable outcome, but I think as a parent, it is in some aspect. And then there's the more, granular stuff. Of course, you can, if you're a football player and you're, training for a combine and you want to measure your 4-yard dash and your vertical and your shuttle time and things like that, 3-cone drill type stuff. Like, yeah, that stuff matters and is measurable. I don't think I wouldn't say it's not as important to what we do, but I think that's there's a lot of opportunities out in different places to do that. I see us in CoachUp specifically on those maybe non-tangible measurements, right? Hey, did I improve? Especially because our demographic's obviously a little bit younger, right? We're that 8 to 15-year-old. So a little bit early high school, mid high school, and then obviously they go off to college or whatnot. So I, did that 9-year-old kid who wanted to try lacrosse for the first time and has never played, always played baseball and got a few sessions, did he, make the team and actually, instead of running around with, not understanding what's going on, did by year 2, after working with a coach and then being part of their team practices, they start to really develop, make the team and be a core member of that team. Like, that's a great outcome. So yeah, it's again, a long-winded way of saying, I think it's hard to measure. I think you have to determine what you're trying to achieve. And then I don't know how measurable some of those things are beyond some of the more granular metrics, for certain sports, your run times or shuttle times, things like that.
And it would strike me that if you're entering a new market, you might have to do a lot of paid acquisition and brand building. But at a certain point, if you get enough density, that word of mouth might carry the day, or at least start playing a more meaningful role. What have you found in your experience in terms of timing, in terms of or kind of state of penetration as it relates to user acquisition? And how do you think about balancing expansion into new markets with penetration in existing markets when you look at the future of CoachUp?
Yeah, I think I understand. I don't use some big words in there. It's above my.
Sorry. No, I'm like the buzzword king. Don't ask me to explain any of it, because I'm just, hucking a bunch of buzzwords around. Yeah.
As far as, growth for the new customers, you can never replace word of mouth. You can never replace word of mouth. And I think that has served us very well over the years of, and we make it very easy to refer a friend. A lot of our groups here that we run, like, you can invite a friend for free to do their first session. Like, we want people to train with friends. Like, we want kids to work together in a group. Kind of, I think we talked about it offline last time we tried. Like, get those kids together. We want them to have a group where it's like, hey, maybe you work with your coach once a week, but you guys should be working on your jump shot. You should be playing, 3-on-3 in the backyard with your buddies after school. Like, you should have the time and ability to do that. So you'll never replace word of mouth. Sometimes word of mouth can be a little funky, because sometimes people don't want to talk about the fact that they work with a skills coach or a private coach. Sometimes people don't want to, it is expensive. So sometimes people don't always want to, share what they're doing with their son or daughter. And, the hockey world, everyone's trying to, like, find that hidden coach who's going to make their kid get to the next level, like find the secret sauce somewhere. But the reality is it comes to just doing the work. So I think word of mouth, I think if we continue to have great coaches on our platform and they do a great job working with their athletes, then in itself, like, that's going to help. I mean, I think that drives most of our customer acquisition. From new markets and a paid digital standpoint, it gets more and more challenging. I think we make an effort to, especially on our paid digital, to kind of more or less show what we do and get away from some of that more generic, like, pre-recorded actors and actresses and things like that. Like, let's really show a coach working with a 10-year-old football player who's out there grinding, trying to get better. Like, that's what motivates me. That's what should motivate a parent who's trying to come to us, not, in a very heavily produced studio doing these, foul shots or whatever it is, right? Like, let's really show the kids out there working hard. And it's not always the elite athlete. Most of the time, it's not the elite athlete. It's the kid who's trying to get better and willing to grind. So, but paid acquisition is going to become more challenging. That's part of our strategy around looking at other channels for growth. So that's facilities, that's other markets, that's other partnerships. It's an enterprise product, so coaches can run their own business and still use our software and build themselves in that local community, right? And help advising them to teach them how to do that, how to run their own Facebook and Instagram ads, how to run their own community type building. So I think it's very much going that direction, where how do we elevate those coaches who are scaling their business? How do we rely less on just digital ads, and how do we touch the customer in a more personalized way? So that's through physical locations and coaches in person.
I got 2 questions left. One is just key priorities over the next 12 or 18 months.
Yeah, this is a good one. We're going to integrate speed and agility, strength and conditioning, human performance in a pretty big way in our facilities. I think I see this. This was really the first facility for us. I think that's a missing component, and we have some updates coming hopefully pretty soon that we'll be able to accomplish that, where we'll have a more robust CoachUp Performance Center where your kids can come and get not only skill development for their respective sport, but they can also get their strength work in, very much within their sport and also within their age group appropriate. So I think that's really the big focus, and I see us having 50 to 100 locations across the country, right? So that's obviously not in the next 18 months, but can we go from 1 to 2, 1 to 3, 1 to 4? I think so. And then how can we prove that in other markets to see the same success that we're having here in Massachusetts? So that's the next 18 months for us.
I mean, I'll try an analogy. Is it like the D1 training for youth sports skills training?
A little bit, I would say, but we're going to be more all-encompassing than they are. And we're also not going to be, we're obviously not a franchise. So I think we're going to hold that brand authenticity and experience through CoachUp, keep that thread throughout all of our locations.
Mm-hmm. And last question, just if CoachUp is successful beyond your wildest dreams, what does it look like at that time in its fullest form?
Good question. I think we're already successful, unfortunately, in a sense that I'm really proud of the fact that I'm lucky to be able to sit back and think about what we do for work, and it's actually really trying to think about helping athletes reach their highest potential, right? And I think it's come full circle with my own kids now entering the sports world and how much this is needed and how much it's how much of an impact it can have on people's lives. So I think that's a success in itself, right? I think if we're really looking at long-term success of what it can be, and I think where I plan on taking it is, you will see a marketplace that's heavily supported by hundreds of locations around the country, and really a home base for those coaches to not only run their businesses, but it's just the CoachUp Performance Center is being synonymous, like with who you are and as an athlete, of where you go to reach your goals, and you do that in an effective and a very efficient way. And I think that that's very possible over the next couple of years.
Well, it's exciting, and I'm definitely wishing you best of luck with it. And I agree with you, by the way, that you are successful. And I mean, look at the work that you do, that you get to do every day, and you're helping people, and it's in a category that's so fun as well, and builds valuable skills for sports and for life. For anyone listening that's inspired by your work like I am, who do you want to hear from, if anybody, or how can listeners be helpful for you?
For me?
Or CoachUp? Yeah, both.
Yeah, I want to hear from everybody. I mean, I would love to hear. I followed a couple of your podcasts. I think, I think hearing other people's journeys and how they think about, especially youth sports development, right? I think is always cool and interesting, right? I think I learned something back in IMG when I used to go down there in my Under Armour days. We used to run those programs like the yes and programs where and people have these ideas and you just keep going yes and you just keep elaborating on that. And I think that's what's cool in youth sports, of how do we continually have that conversation to do what's right for the athlete and for the coach, and truly think about development, right? And that's at the youth level, that's at the town level, that's at the tournament team level. Like, how do we make sure that we're not just capitalizing on profits and growth in business, and how do we focus to ensure that we're focusing on doing what's best for the athletes and the coaches, and really thinking about it from a development lens. So I'd love to learn, and I love talking, hearing from like sports psychologists and youth sports type people who really think about and talk about the impact of youth sports, and helping educate parents who maybe aren't as aware or in the space like you are or were and are now currently with your own kids, or me in the space. So those parents who are totally naive to the situations, and they're trying to just keep up and do what people say, right? How can we give them more resources and grab some more people that maybe can help guide them in the right direction?
And if people want to learn more about CoachUp, where should they go?
CoachUp.com, CoachUp Training Center down in Woburn. If you're in the local area, you can reach me directly. So yeah, I mean, we're pretty easy to find. If you search anything related to CoachUp, we're going to hit you with our ads too, so you'll see them everywhere. And book a session, try it. I think you'll see the improvement with your kids pretty quickly.
Thanks for coming on, Alex. Best of luck to you and to CoachUp.
Thanks, Jason. Appreciate it, man.